Thesis, Research Station New Halifax. Received Talassa Prime. Subject, Tyranid Bioweaponry Thesis. Asteroid, Prime Minus. Ref, Inc. 05646/F. Clayton.
Lord Commanders, while the development of natural projectile weaponry is known to occur in nature, the extent to which the symbiotic organisms are utilized for this by the Tyranids is astounding. Somatic, pulmonary, bioelectric, and biochemical munitions are commonly employed by and nurtured within the Tyranid organisms. What follows is a brief description suitable for dispensation to troops that may encounter this menace to the Imperium. Majos Biologis Salk. While some of the more bestial members of the Tyranid species lack any sort of ranged capability, an increasing number of the larger, more advanced creatures are making use of them. Horrifying in effect, these biological weapons are quite efficient against even the might of the Adeptus Astartes. The barbed strangler, for example. The actual mode of delivery utilized by the barbed strangler is nearly identical to the venom cannon with respect to somatic methods. The main difference between the two weapons lies in the projectile. The weapon itself, while symbiotic, also plays host to an epiphyte-like parasitic plant, which produces the fruit that forms the ammunition for the weapon. These large mutant seeds are heavy and dense. The typical rind is replaced by a catalytic epithium. Upon impact, this causes germination that is explosive and extremely rapid. Root tendrils and rhizomes erupt in all directions, adhering to anything they cannot penetrate. As the metabolic apocalypse continues, silicate thorns and barbs begin to form, tearing and piercing anything captured, and draining moisture and nutrients at a horrifying speed. Hypothesis. Evolutionary speaking, these seed pods exhibit characteristics one would expect to find in many Death World floras. Rapid growth would allow the plant to avoid predation and possibly ensnare food sources. In its current form, the flora undergoes the entire growth cycle from seed to mature plant in a matter of seconds. This is a tremendous outlay of the metabolic energy, and the resultant plant appears to be a sterile mutant, albeit a stable one. The parasitic version incorporated into the weapon is likely to be the natural form of the plant. However, once again we see the Tyranids are able to manipulate the genome of a species radically by producing a parent capable of generating offspring vastly deviant from its own morphology. The Death Spitter bioweapon is a complex system. The highly volatile nature of the ammunition has hindered efforts to adequately describe its composition prior to firing. However, analysis indicates that the following information is highly likely. The main structure of the weapon houses a brood chamber, wherein lies the incubating young, which may possibly be the protoplasmic cleaning creatures reported during boarding missions against Tyranid bioships in space by the Space Wolves. Adjacent to this is a crustacean that tends the brood and performs a critical function in the firing process. The firing chamber is a tight tube of horn and bone sealed within a powerfully muscled flap. Firing this bioweapon is accomplished in the following manner. Bioelectric signals goad the crustacean to retrieve an embryonic cyst and take it to the firing chamber. Once there, the crustacean splits the cyst, exposing the immature flesh of the embryo as it places it in the firing tube. Note that it appears to be a conditioned response, as the crustacean is then allowed to eat the highly nutritious cyst husk as a reward for the action. Within the firing chamber, the biological breech block closes. When this occurs, the enzymes on the breech block react explosively with the exposed flesh of the embryo, launching it screaming towards the target. The biochemistry of the embryotic acid blob is extremely volatile with most atmospheres, causing it to audibly hiss as the epidermal layers are stripped away in chemical fire. Upon impact, the embryo is slain, and the semi-gelatinous mass of incomplete protein congeners, acids, caustics, and enzymes is splattered over a significant area. The results to exposed personnel are horrific, and many of the chemicals are of sufficient potency to damage Imperial armored vehicles. Hypothesis. Unable to formulate any hypothetical evolutionary path for the development of this weapon other than significant bioengineering and opportunistic utilization of multiple resources. The Devourer is more of a hive than a distinct organism. The weapon is meshed within the host in such a way as to provide food and incubation for a host of malformed ripper larvae. It is these larvae which form the ammunition for the weapon. A large conical horn is perforated with multiple breathing tubes that also serve as avenues of egress in times of danger. Pheromone signals call the larvae to the breathing tubes when the host senses the need to utilize the weapon. A bioelectric surge signals the brood to attack. When they encounter any object, they immediately begin biting and burrowing in a frenzied attack while secreting highly corrosive bile. These creatures show a distinct taste for neurological tissues and move to the spinal column and brain with extreme haste, causing an agonizing but mercifully quick death. Hypothesis. This would seem to indicate biomanipulation of an aggressive defense mechanism in the original species. Note, the demoralizing effect of this weapon has been noted, and all Imperial officers should be prepared to bolster any troops that encounter them. The flesh borer, employed by base troops of the Tyranids, is a brood chamber. Housed within it is a large brood of borer beetles that, once mature, is kept in a state of torpor by hormone emissions. These beetles are hatched and grown within the weapons and presumably spend their entire lives within its confines until they are called upon. Neurological stimulation from the host signals the weapon to move one of the beetles to the firing sphincter. Once there, the beetle is awakened from its sleep and awaits the bioelectric signal to attack. Genetic engineering seems to have produced these blind beetles. The halteres are configured in such a way as to prevent any significant deviation in flight trajectory. When it receives the attack signal, the sphincter opens, allowing the beetle to streak towards the target. Upon impact, the beetle, clinging tenaciously, begins to secrete digestive enzymes and uses its powerful jaws to begin burrowing into the target. All this is accomplished with blinding speed and ferocity. This activity persists until the beetle's meager energy stores are depleted and it dies from exhaustion, or some trauma ends its short and violent life. Synopsis. Similar in form and function to the Devourer, presumably an aggressive fauna whose natural instincts have been utilized to create effective weapons, it is theorized that the weapons are radically modified versions of the beetle and actually produce the eggs they brood. The spine fist is typically seen attached to the upper appendage, with a long larynx coiled around to the main body of the host, where it connects to a respirator system. The spine fist is a crustacean that develops a set of lethally poisonous spikes, similar to many oceanic echinoderms. The spines are loosely connected and situated upon a series of baffled airways. Employing an unusual method of delivery, The spine fist is powered by large, heavily muscled breathing chambers within the host's body. When channeled to the creature, the gas volume expanded by the rapid contraction of the bladders serves to propel the munitions. The creature itself only allows one section of its arsenal to be open to the airways at a time, thus ensuring multiple volleys can be fired, if needed. Hypothesis: the organism in its present form is incapable of delivering its spines to any target without the aid of the host. It appears to be engineered from intertidal predatory crustaceans that likely utilized the compressibility of gaseous atmospheres to charge its weapon batteries. The long umbilical larynx would indicate that it likely remained firmly attached to the seabed or coral reef. While raising this larynx to acquire gases, liquids would require more energy to compress to a viable degree than the gases. Autopsies indicate vestigial gills and tethers where the spines appear to have been anchored. This would have allowed the organism to spear prey in the violent surf and reel it back in without ever having to release its anchor. Even compressed to the expected biological degree this organism may have been able to attain, the gases would have adversely affected its buoyancy, necessitating the tenacious grip on a firm anchor to avoid exceeding the water column, and thus being vulnerable to predators. The venom cannon is a large, slender horn-like weapon. It is a hollow tube, lined with concentric muscles, which expels with great force a cyst. Large pulmonary sacs have been observed in some creatures' autopsies, which may provide force upon the projectile as well. These cysts are produced within the body cavity of the host Tyranid that is connected to the weapon by several umbilicals. These provide the weapon with neural stimuli, nourishment, and ammunition. The cyst has a carapace hull with an insulating internal lipid layer, the contents of which are highly pressurized. It contains a voracious cocktail of acids, enzymes, and toxins, which are released upon impact. This is capable of dissolving armor and flesh with equal relish. The cyst, however, is not extremely dense or hard, and thus most armored vehicles can withstand impacts without critical damage. Hypothesis: from an evolutionary standpoint, it is hard to imagine how such a symbiotic organism came to be. One might suspect that this is a defensive adaptation taken out of context and utilized. It is known that these weapons are widely used to exterminate large indigenous lifeforms on planets prior to tyrannoforming. Perhaps they act as a first-stage digestion process as well as an effective weapon. Lash whips typically exhibit 3 radiant tendrils that terminate in hooks of rigid horn. The body of the organism is contained within a bony shelf that is characteristically grasped. Data collected from auspex and field examinations indicate animal intelligence. The lash whips will continue to attack any who approach long after the wielder is eliminated, and tests seem to indicate that they do this by sensing brain waves. Perhaps another natural predation tactic appropriated by the tyrannic horde for weapons applications. The hive mind wavelengths do not stimulate the creature to attack, more likely due to long periods of pseudo-symbiotic relationship or bioengineering. However, it is suspected that the neural linkages and sensory nodes on the sheath may allow for more direct control of the weapon's actions. Hypothesis: presumably the product of bioengineering, a common radiant marine organism. Magos Biologische Salk, Draco Legion, Biomedical Research Station.